Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Last few lessons we've been taking Kitab al-Salah, and we spoke about the timings of the Salah, we spoke about Adhan, and we just finished going through the actual prayer of Salah, meaning how to perform the Salah. From the very beginning, when a person says Allahu Akbar, up to when they end and they say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thereafter, they gave you a few uh, miscellaneous masail. And inshallah, now we're moving on to witr, Salatul Witr. So if you put here Salatul Witr, why they mention Salatul Witr? Obviously, it's one of the salawat. Uh, the Hanafis consider it to be wajib. And bearing in mind that the Hanafis differentiate between fard and wajib. Fard is of the highest standing, and wajib is a little bit less than fard. As for the other madhahib, they consider fard and wajib to be one. So when it comes to the ruling of witr, the Hanafi madhab put more emphasis on it. They say is wajib. The other madhahib are of the opinion that it's highly recommended, but not wajib or not compulsory. Okay? Thereafter, there's different ways to perform Salatul Witr. Right now we're going according to the Hanafi madhab. We're teaching the Hanafi madhab. So in the Hanafi madhab, Witr is read throughout the year in the same way. How many raka'at in Witr? In the Hanafi madhab, it's 3 raka'at. Okay? These 3 raka'at in the Hanafi madhab, they are not separated. Okay? So for example, you find the other madhahib, sometimes people read 2 and 1. Okay? Hanafi madhab tell you 3 biduni fasl, without separating them. How are they read? In the Hanafi madhab, they read similar to how how Maghrib is read. So you read 2 units of prayer, you sit in the first tashahhud, and then you stand up for the third rak'ah. So there's no fasl between them. Then, in the third rak'ah, when you've stood up, you read your surah, meaning Surah Al-Fatiha, as well as the surah. Then a person remains standing and they say Allahu Akbar. Like this, they raise their hands and then they tie the hands on or below the navel as is in the madhab. So notice the differences. First is 3 raka'at fully. Okay? And it's read almost exactly like Maghrib. After 2, you would sit and then you would get up in the third one. Also, if the Imam is reading, he'll be reciting loudly in all 3 raka'at. And every raka'ah will have Surah Al-Fatiha as well as a recitation, a surah from the Quran. Okay? So that's the difference. The Hanafi madhab have their own unique way of reading Salatul Witr. Thereafter, how do they recite the qunut? There's different qunuts they read, but the one that's common taught in the Hanafi madhab, they say, Allahumma inna nasta'inuka wa nastaghfiruka wa nu'minu bika wa natawakkalu alayk. That's the dua till the end. Whereas you find the others would be reciting, Allahumma hdini fi man hadayt wa afini fi man afayt. So the way they make the dua is also slightly different. And then they go on to give you a few masail when it comes to this Salatul Witr. So one of them they tell you is there's no qunut in any other salah besides witr. Qunut meaning the dua. Okay? Why? Because in the Shafi'i madhab, for example, uh, in some of the opinions in the madhab, they would read the qunut in Salatul Fajr, etc. So the Hanafi madhab are telling you that there's no qunut in any other fard salah. Not in Fajr, not in Dhuhr, not in Asr, not in Maghrib, not in Isha. Okay? So again, to recap quickly, Salatul Witr in the Hanafi madhab is 3. The other madhahib, 1 is the least amount, and a person can read 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, etc. How they want to read them again in those different madhahib, they have different opinions. Also, when it comes to the dua. Okay? When it comes to the dua, the other madhahib of the opinion that those who make dua, the dua is after ruku'. The Hanafi madhab, the dua is before ruku'. The dua is before ruku'. Also, there's a long debate as to the correct way of reading witr. The Hanafi madhab have their opinion, the evidence. The others say no, there's a hadith where the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, don't make Salatul Witr and Salatul Maghrib the same. They shouldn't be the same to one another. So the fact that you reading three like Maghrib shows that our way is more correct. And then there's a back and forth. If you want to go and read all the difference of opinion, you go to the longer books. Thereafter, the two or three miscellaneous masail that they mention, and slowly they getting you to Babul Imama, where certain masail with regards to the Imam, then they're going to mention Sajda to Sahu, some of the exceptions to the rule, etc. So they getting you prepared for that after having taught you the asl and the default ruling in all the previous lessons. So one of the masail they speak about is adna al-qira'ah. Okay, how much does a person need to recite? Remember, we said in the Hanafi madhab, Surah Al-Fatiha, they term it to be wajib, but not a pillar of salah. So if a person leaves out Surah Al-Fatiha and reads anything else, in the Hanafi madhab, the salah is still valid. Whereas the others say, Fatihatul Kitab is a pillar of salah. Because the Messenger said, La salata illa bi Fatihatil Kitab. There's no salah except by a person reading the Fatiha. Hanafi madhab's response to this is the meaning of this hadith is no salah which is tam or kamila, which is complete fully. So they're saying that it's better to read Fatiha. However, this hadith is only saying your reward will be less. And they have a give and take between them. So in the Hanafi madhab, if a person doesn't recite, Surah Al-Fatiha in the Salah, the Salah is still valid. Then they go on to say, what's the least amount a person should recite? Let's say he's not reciting Fatiha. They call it Adna al-Qira'ah, the least amount. I'm just going to put an Al there. Imam Abu Hanifa is of the opinion that anything that's termed to be Quran, even if it's less than a verse, okay? Anything termed to be Quran, even if it's less than a verse. Remember, this is not encouragement. They're talking about, they told you what's the default ruling. Then what if a person read less? Is the salah counted or not counted? That's why these masail come up. So he says, what's considered to be Quran is enough for recitation. Imam Abu Yusuf, his student, is of the opinion that a person should recite at least 3 verses if the verses are short, or 1 longer verse. So for example, if a person is reading a short surah, then at least 3 verses. Or if it's a longer ayah, then at least 1 ayah. Then they go on to speak about, and this will come later on, if a person can't read Surah Al-Fatiha, can't read a surah, let's say a new Muslim, etc., what do they do? Okay, then the next mas'ala, or the last mas'ala they touch on in Babul Witr, chapter speaking about witr, is the ma'mum, the one who is reading behind the imam. He shouldn't recite anything. Recite anything meaning from the Quran. Recite anything from the Quran. So that would mean that he wouldn't recite any Fatiha. He wouldn't recite any surah. Okay. And that would also mean that, for example, in Salatul Dhuhr, Salatul Asr, the one behind the Imam in the Hanafi madhab is not supposed to read from the Quran. So they can read the Dua al-Istiftah. As for Quran, then they're not supposed to recite. And that's the Hanafi madhab. The others have their opinions. What's important for you guys at this stage is to know that these masail exist. So if somebody asks you, for example, or you know that in Kitab al-Salah, There's so many masail which are mentioned. And as I told you before, when you're learning fiqh, all these books, what do they contain? They just contain masail. And they've tried to put them in such an order that, it makes sense. So like they gave you what's required for the salah, then they gave you the conditions of the salah, then they taught you how to read the salah, then after the first salah, they're teaching you how to read witr, and that's enough for an individual. Okay, after that, a person may need to be an imam. Okay, this is how you read when you're an imam. After that, a person may make a mistake in salah. This is how you correct the mistake, etc. And generally, you'll find between all the madhahib, the title of the mas'ala or the mas'ala stays the same. However, the opinion may differ. So, for example, if you're talking about gargling in wudu, the mas'ala will be, is gargling compulsory or not? That's all the madhahib, the mas'ala will be like that. Then they will mention their opinion. Gargling, according to us, is sunnah because of X, Y, and Z. The others will mention gargling is compulsory because of X, Y, and Z. So if you notice, this fiqh or these abwab are made up of masail, masail, masail. And generally, the big masail have furu' to them. So they have smaller masail, smaller masail, smaller masail. So I'll give an example of a smaller mas'ala. After they taught you, for example, that to wipe the head, okay, making masah, is a pillar of wudu. Okay, what happens if a person, or should a person be wiping the full head or not? What happens if they wipe less than the full head? What's the least amount that would be correct if a person makes masah, etc.? So if you look at it, if the big mas'ala is wudu, but then when it just comes to the head alone, you've got another so many masail. When it comes to the feet, so many masail. When it comes to this, so many masail. And the more you learn, okay, at the beginning of your journey, you have to go like this way. You start learning that these masail actually exist. So, for example, in Kitab al-Salah, maybe before you just knew how to read Salah. Now you know there's so many masail attached to this kitab. Then when you go over fiqh again, you can go into a bit more detail. Then you go over it again, then you go into difference of opinion, etc. And that's how, especially for those who have time, that is one of the best ways to learn fiqh. At times, some people start all the way on the top, where they only learn difference of opinion. So this is this, and this is this, and this is this. The problem with that is every time you ask them a question, they're unsure. They'll say there's more than one opinion and stop there. So this tadarruj in learning, and especially in seeking fiqh, and there's a methodology for it. And there's no harm. Even those who didn't stick to a madhab, generally most of them started off by learning a madhab. And whichever madhab you learn, preferably choose the madhab that's practiced upon in your community to learn, or in your place, because you'll find a lot of people sticking to the madhab. Then there'll be few masail that they themselves leave the madhab on. And if you're somebody who is in a community where they don't necessarily stick to one madhab, when it comes to learning purposes, the madhahib have put the masail in order. So it's still a way of learning, and then you go on